Well, it is Mother's Day. I want to echo what Lindsay said in terms of Happy Mother's Day, but I also know that today represents really, for so many of us in this room, kind of this wide, very wide spectrum of all the emotions and thoughts related to what Mother's Day represents. And so I know some of you are here, and I'm looking at some faces, and this is your very first Mother's Day, and there's something that feels special about that. Others of you, you know you're well on your way to having a first Mother's Day, and yet some of you, you aren't filled with your wishes in this area of life. Some of you ladies, maybe you want to be a mom, and for whatever reason, that just hasn't happened yet. I also know that some of you have really great relationships with your mom, and I hope that you're thrilled that she's in your life and that you've let her know that. Don't text your mom Happy Mother's Day, okay? Anybody, no, I can't even let you confess in this. That's like confessional booth material only, okay? Don't confess among the rest of us. Call your moms if you're able to do that. I know some of you, the environment that you grew up in with your mom wasn't what you might have hoped she would have been, and I hope that there's an opportunity for redemption and reconciliation there, but I understand you might have a heavy heart today. Some of you are blessed that your parents live really close. Anyone? Like your parents live really close? Just trying to see who the rest of us are jealous of this morning. Awesome. And then the rest of us, our parents are really far away. Anybody besides? Yeah. Look at that. That's crazy. That's crazy. This is why we have this family called Epic Church. And then some of us, I know I'm in this camp, some of us wish our moms were still alive to be able to see what's going on in our lives today. And so I know that I'm not alone in that. And so there's this whole wide spectrum of emotion, of real tons of joy to tons of sorrow and a lot of things in between. And for someone like me and many of you, like there's a happy side. Like, man, it's awesome that God's blessed me with this woman to mother my children. It's a very sad thing that my mom isn't here to see it. And so wherever you're at in that, I just want to say our heart goes out to you. We're sensitive to that. But what I can say without segmenting or separating anyone is that if you are a female in the house with us today, would you stand up so we can just tell you as guys how honored we are that you're here? Come on, all the ladies in the house, young, old. Stay standing because you know this. Come on, ladies, you know this already, but we would be hopeless and helpless as guys without you, okay? So thank you. You can have a seat. I want you to feel honored here. We have amazing leaders, women leaders in our church. You guys have made this church so much of what it is, and so we're grateful. Us as guys, we know that we wouldn't stand a chance, literally not a chance, without you in our lives and in our church community, and so we're grateful for you. Whenever something in our lives seems like it is obviously over, we should just let it rest, right? When something's over, it should just be over, and we should just move on to something else. I'll never forget when I was dating this girl in college, I finally got the courage to break up with her. That's right, guys. I was a little more sensitive than you. You guys are harsh. You could do it, not feel it. For me, I was like, oh, I need to, but how do I do it? And so finally, I remember breaking up with her one afternoon, and it needed to happen for like months. And so finally, the relief is there. The weight's off my shoulders. I went to college in the town where I grew up, and so I remember that afternoon after class, going home, I was going to just feel relief and just enjoy it. I make the turn down the street to where my parents' home was, and my ex-girlfriend's car was at my parents' house. I'm like, she's not pulling this move, is she? But here's the thing. I thought it was over, and I was like, oh, she's going through my mom. I mean, what is this? She's going through my mom, but you're like, Ben, how does this relate to what we're talking about? Here's how it relates. When things are obviously over in our lives, we should just let them rest and move on. Unless there's a reason we shouldn't let them rest. Shauna and I today want to give a message about what it looks like to keep engaging Jesus even when it seems like something is already over. What does it look like? How do we do it? Why do we do it? To keep engaging Jesus when it seems like something is over. So if you have a Bible, we're in Mark chapter 5 this morning. If you need one, raise a hand and we'll get you one. Yours to keep for the morning or for forever. Mark chapter 5, This amazing story about why and how you and I should keep engaging Jesus no matter what things seem like, no matter if it seems like the fat lady has sung, to use the end of a game expression, whatever it seems like, we should keep pushing in, leaning in, going for it, asking him to do the kinds of things only he can do. So would you stand with me, Mark chapter 5? And here's what I want to do with this text. I want us to look at 21 through 24, and then we'll skip over that middle part. We're going to talk about that next week. It's a completely different story, related, but different story. So we'll go 21 to 24, and then we'll get down to 35 through 43. But I think some amazing principles are going to jump out of this story, this encounter Jesus has with this guy and his daughter. So here we go, Mark 5, 21 through 24, and then 35 to 43. And when Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered about him, and he was beside the sea. Then came one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and seeing him, he fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live." And he went with him, and a great crowd followed him, that's followed Jesus, and thronged about him. Now skip down to 35. While he was still speaking, there came from the ruler's house, that's Jairus' house, some who said, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the ruler of the synagogue, this is Jairus, "Do not fear, only believe." And he allowed no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. They came to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and Jesus saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. And when he had entered, he said to them, "Why are you making a commotion and weeping? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him, but he put them all outside and took the child's father and mother and those who were with him and went in there where the child was. Taking her by the hand, he said to her, "Talitha cumi," which means, "Little girl, I say to you, arise." And immediately the girl got up and began walking, for she was 12 years of age. And they were immediately overcome with amazement. And he, Jesus, strictly charged that no one should know this and told them to give her something to eat. You may be seated. Some things in this text really did jump off of the page at me this week. And so if you're taking notes, the first thing that you see is this: Jesus notices the individual in the midst of the crowd. Jesus notices the individual in the midst of the crowd. In this story and in next week's story, in the same chapter, you see a crowd pressing in on Jesus. Like a big, massive group pressing in on Jesus. But Jesus sees and hears and responds to the individuals involved in the story. And if you're anything like me, you're living on a planet with more than 7 billion people. You're living in the Bay Area with more than 7 million people. You've got to wonder at times, like, God, there's so much going on. There are so many issues in this world. Do you see mine? Do you see me? Do you know me? Will you respond to me? Like, God, am I good enough to warrant your attention? Is my issue large enough for you to gaze my way and understand what I'm going through? And what he wants to say to you this morning is yes. He sees and he cares deeply. At Epic, we say all the time that life is meant to be shared and that our faith isn't just personal, it's also communal. But while it goes beyond the personal, why it's more than personal, I want you to hear this morning that it's not less than personal. Like whatever your thing is, he's in the midst of it. Whatever you're struggling with, whatever it is that this isn't going the way you wish it would go, God wants you to know this morning, like he sees it, he's ready to respond to you personally. And that's what Jesus does with Jairus. He's in the midst of a crowd. He doesn't tell Jairus not to bother him. He responds to him personally. And as the story goes on, look at verse 23. Here's Jairus' issue. Here's why he's coming to Jesus in desperation. The text says he implores him earnestly. He's desperate and he's passionate and he wants Jesus to do something about a situation. Here's what he says. "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay your hands on her so that she may be made well and live." My little daughter is at the point of death. My little 12-year-old daughter is at the point of death. Do you know what he's saying? Jesus, if you don't intervene, if you don't get in the midst of my situation, if you don't do something for her, it's over for her life. You can imagine as a mom or dad why that might lead you to do something desperate. But while Jairus is doing something desperate, he's not just trying anything at all costs. He believes Jesus can do something about a situation. And for some of us right now, listen, I can't guarantee that the thing you want healed will be healed. I can't guarantee that the career you want to keep going will keep going. I can't guarantee a lot of things this morning, but some of us are missing out on what Jesus wants to do in our lives because we won't believe that he can take care of something that's bigger than our own power. And what he's trying to do is he's trying to get Jesus' attention. He's like, Jesus, my little daughter is at the point of death, but if you will come do something, you can make her well. Here's a question for you. What in your life is at the point of death? What is at the point of death in your life? Maybe it's your marriage. Like you're here with your spouse this morning and you guys have smiles on because it's church. But the reality is it feels like it's at the point of death. You don't see the point. Keep going on. What about your career? How many of you, don't raise your hand, unless you think we can promise you a job. Some of you might feel like your career is at the point of death. And maybe for a few different reasons. Some of you, maybe it's an age thing and you're headed towards retirement, but you need to make a little more money before you walk away, and all of a sudden you're realizing no one wants to hire someone your age. For some of you, it's not an old thing, it's a young thing. You're looking for that entry-level thing. The university that you paid $50,000 a year promised you would make that back, right? And for you, you're like, man, the thing's at the point of death, and I hadn't even started my career. Maybe it's a family member or a friend, and really their health. I mean, they are at the point of death. And if there's not intervention from Jesus, it's over. Maybe it's a dream. Maybe there's something you were passionate about, some goal that you had, some hope that you lived with. And it seemed a while ago, like it really seemed promising. But right now, it's on its last leg. It's at the point of death. Some of you, it's a business you felt called to start, but you've got one pitch left in you, and if it doesn't go well, this thing is over. For some of you, you just said yes to your last possible rent increase in San Francisco, and the next one's at the point of death, right? Because if something doesn't change with your finances, 12 months from now when they raise it again, you're out. What's at the point of death in your life? And what's your response to it? Oftentimes, we walk away from our faith and from Jesus during those times, and what I want to stress to you is that we need to be leaning in, and here's why we need to be leaning in. In verse 35, they come back. This other thing has happened we'll talk about next week. They come back in verse 35, and someone comes from Jairus' house and says this to him. Your daughter is dead. Just moments ago, here's Jairus' saying, Jesus, my little girl's at the point of death, but now the situation has changed. It's gone from a bad situation to an even worse, the worst situation for a parent. Would you not agree? And no longer is it, Jesus, I need you to heal this little girl because she's at the point of death. It now has to be, Jesus, I don't need you to heal this little girl. I need you to resurrect this little girl. Jairus, your daughter is dead. And then they ask Jairus this question. It's a question you need to engage with this morning. Here's the question. Jairus, your daughter is dead. Why bother the teacher? Why trouble the teacher any further? You see that question? Jesus, your daughter's dead. Or Jairus, your daughter is dead. What are you doing talking to the teacher still? Like maybe he could have done something when she was just sick, but now she's dead. Why trouble the teacher any further? You know what they're saying to Jairus, right? Jairus, it's over, man. Let it rest. We'll console you, and you see the weeping, and that's happening. There's a deep sense of mourning in the community. People were close to Jairus and his family. They loved this little girl, and she dies. Jairus, why trouble the teacher any further? It's over. Let it rest. And I think if Jairus had answered the question directly, why trouble the teacher any further, I think here's his response. Because he's more than just a teacher. You see, when your little 12-year-old girl dies, you don't need a teacher, do you? All right, we need a teacher when we want knowledge. We want a teacher when we don't know how to do something. But when we need resurrection, we need more than a teacher. And the beauty here is that Jesus is so much more than a teacher. Jairus, your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further? Guys, because he's not just a teacher. He is, as he said in his own words, the resurrection and the life. He has a power that goes beyond just knowledge. He is able to bring dead things back to life. I know, I don't just need her healed anymore, but I believe he can do the thing that I still need for him to do for this little girl. Why trouble the teacher any further? And then Jesus responds. Jesus says to Jairus, do not fear, only believe. Do not fear, only believe. Where do you need to hear this over your life this morning? Do not fear, only believe. Do not fear, Only believe. What is Jesus saying? Jairus, they're telling you it's over. But I've got a trump card. Jairus, it's not over. But here's your part, Jairus. Don't miss this. Here's your part, Jairus. Do not fear. Only believe. Do not fear. Only believe. Guys, there's a reason why the commandment to do not fear shows up over 360 times in the scriptures. It's because the humans that we think a ton of, whose stories made it into the Bible, and we think they were the super Christian heroes, the reason it shows up so much is because Jesus knows, God knows that if we won't fear, then we can have faith. And that if we'll have faith, we can actually not have fear. But their response initially was the same as your response. And he's like, Jairus, don't fear, only believed. And then Jesus says this, he's like, the little girl, she's not dead, she's just sleeping. Now, some of you might be thinking, oh, okay, so it's not that big of a miracle. Jesus says she's just sleeping. No, she's dead. Like, Ben, how do you know? Because these people had been around death before. They look at her. She's dead. She's dead. She's absolutely dead. And Jesus says the child is not dead but sleeping. And then how do they respond to Jesus in verse 40? It's funny to me. Have you ever been in a situation where people go from like weeping to laughing? That's the scene here. There's a scene of mourning. Weeping and wailing. And then Jesus is like, no, she's just sleeping. And then they just start cracking up. Don't miss what Jesus does with them next. This is a massive principle that's kind of the big idea for me this morning. What does he do next? Somebody tell me. He puts those who are laughing where? Outside the house. Don't miss this point. This is the one that just like over the last 10 days, it just amazed Shauna and I as we've sunk a little deeper into this text. He puts them outside the house. Now, here's what you and I would have done. You're just like me in this way, okay? So don't try to act like you're holier than I am, all right? What you and I would have done if we were Jesus is left them in the house so we could prove it to him, right? Right? Like, hey, let me show you laughers. This is a laugh of unbelief. Remember, Sarah had that laugh of unbelief too. If I was Jesus, if you were Jesus, like, hey, come watch this, right? Because I love to prove things to people. Anybody else? Like, can we just admit, like, hey, this is one of my, like, vices in life. Anybody? Oh, such a great thing for Google. People are like, no, he didn't hit that many home runs. Oh, yes, he did. You know? I'll show you. You can't do that. Okay, that's probably right. I can't do too much. But if I can do something, I want to prove it to you. And so you would think that Jesus would go like, hey, guys, come inside the house. Let me prove you wrong. But he doesn't do that. He does the exact opposite thing. And just so you know, there is this correlation. I'm going to sound like a TV preacher, but just hang with me, okay? There is a correlation between what we believe Jesus will do and what he actually does. Am I saying whatever we think he'll do or ask him to do or believe he'll do, he automatically does it? No, but there's a correlation. Let me give you just one chapter over. In Mark chapter 6, Jesus is now in his hometown of Nazareth. He's wanting to do seemingly a ton of good there, a ton of miracles. And here's what happens in Nazareth. In Mark 6, one chapter over, verses 5 and 6, it says this about Jesus in his time at Nazareth. And he could do what? He could do what? My 9-year-old's on point, but anybody else? Come on. And he could do no mighty work. Why? Did he have a power problem? Somebody had tied his hands behind his back. He could do no mighty work there except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them. And he marveled because of their unbelief. You're like, wait a minute. See, here's what happens. We're either inside the house of faith or we're outside with unbelief. And some of us who've lived most of our faith life on the outside, we always want to know, why does God love them more? Why are they seeing Jesus do some things in their lives? And part of the answer, I think, is because they're willing to stay inside the house of faith. No guarantees here, but it just seems like there's this correlation between people who are staying in the faith with Jesus and what Jesus does in response to it. There absolutely is a correlation. So, would your faith have put you inside the house, or would your unbelief have left you outside? Most of us love to be on the outside, right? I want to be on the outside, and I want to watch you guys do an awesome faith thing on the inside. And here's what we say to people when we're on the outside. You have that crazy, amazing faith, and I just couldn't do it. But then we go, man, why are they seeing God do so much in their life? Because they take Jesus for his word. They believe that he is who he said he was. They're staying in the house while we're on the outside. These people missed it. And the question you've got to ask is like, hey, how am I missing it? Am I on the outside of this thing or am I in the midst of it? Because what many of us think, this is a true story, many of us think in this room, oh, God has some really cool faith things for these people to do. But what I want to assert to you this morning is that he's got a faith move for every single one of us to make, and we'll either be all up in it or outside away from the action. Some of us are missing it not because God's giving it just to a few others. It's because we aren't willing to trust him for who he is. Here's what I know to be true, so let me give you this principle. We want Jesus to show us something, and then we'll have faith, right? By the way, that wouldn't be faith, but that's what we want. We want Jesus to show us something, and then we're like, yep. We want Jesus to show us something, and then we'll have faith. But here's what's true, I think. Jesus wants us to have faith, and then he'll show us something. But like, Ben, I want the first one. Prove it to me. The people that got to see Jesus work were the people who did what? Just believed. Just believed. So are you inside the house? Are you outside the house? Are you inside the faith story that God's writing in your life? Or are you only going with reason and logic and the way things appear? These groups of people, these people that were there with Jairus, I believe that they loved him. They just didn't share his faith. And so they missed out. And they would never have a story to tell like Jairus and his wife would have to tell. Why? Because I think Jairus hung in there. Here's a question for you. What do you think is outside the control or the authority of Jesus? What do you think is outside the control or the authority of Jesus? And I want to tell you, here's how you can answer this question. Two questions secondarily. If you want to know what you think functionally, I'm not talking about your church answer this morning or my church answer, but here's what you and I think are the things that are outside the control and authority of Jesus. Number one, anything that we look at right now and say it's hopeless, it's of no use, we shouldn't bother God about it. Okay, so what's on that list? And secondarily, anything that right now in your life you're trying to control yourself, at least functionally, you believe that it's outside the control of Jesus. So what is that for you? When Jesus performed his miracles, he did so through word and or through touch. And as I wrap up my time, and Shauna's going to come finish this message in just a moment, here's what I want to ask you. What word do you need over your life this morning, over something that looks like it's just done for? And secondarily, what part of your life is desperate for his touch? What have you already thrown in the towel on? He's like, hey, don't count me out yet. What have you already thrown the towel in? You're like, hey, that thing is done. They told me it's over. The doctor said this. The boss said that. The girlfriend said this. The pastor at my old church said that. What is over? It seems like it's over, but he's going, hey, as long as I'm still here, I can do something about it. Quit throwing in the towel. And here's the thing. Shauna's going to share our story in just a minute. You need to know this. Like, we're not seeing God do over these 3 years in our adoption process because there's something special about us. Obviously. It has nothing to do with my title. It has nothing to do with what we have to offer. In fact, it's been some of the hardest times in our entire lives. But we have said to Jesus, okay, she said it. No, I wanted to bow out, all right? I was like, Shauna, outside the house ain't so bad. Right? And at the times where it was at a dead end, she's like, no, we're staying in. We're going to stay in the fight. And because we stayed in, it brought a lot more pain. But how does the psalmist say it? Pain lasts for the night, but joy comes in the morning. I'm going to let Shauna come share with you guys just what we've experienced from this text and in our own lives for the last 1,000 days or so.
And it is with great joy, when Ben and I were planning this talk, we had no idea what was going to be leading up to this week. But it is with great joy that we tell you we passed court on Monday, and the judge signed off on the orders on Thursday, and that we are proud parents of Kavita Hope Pilgreen. We started this adoption journey knowing we were going to need Jesus every step of the way. We just had no idea that it was going to hit a point of death or how satisfying Jesus was going to become to us. I've kept a prayer journal. writing is what I like to do. And I want to read one of the journal entries I wrote to God on Mother's Day, 2013. God, as we sang and declared this morning in church, God is able. I envisioned you and Kavita at the orphanage door on the day we met for the first time. You reminded me that you were there with her every day. You never leave her, and though others might have forsaken her, you haven't. Your arm is stretched out around back her shoulder. You both smile. My faith right now is being made sight. Thank you, Jesus. We pray and beg and ask and trust and wait for her to be with us. Oh, that she would be with us next Mother's Day. You are able. It's February 2014, and Ben and I are sitting in the van. We've got our agency on speakerphone, and they tell us, the highest committee in the land has denied you, Kavita. Our agency has been remarkable this whole time and has been very supportive and have advocated for us. But in that moment, it was as if my flesh was saying, forget about it. She's dead. Why bother God anymore? So we had a choice to make. Why bother God anymore? The day of that denial, I wrote this out. When hope is shaken, I have found out today, with the help of audible voices and my faith in Jesus, that I fight. I may look battered if you see me soon, but I'm going to tell you I'm fighting. I'm believing. I'm hoping. I can only say this and believe it with every ounce of my being because of my hope in Jesus. Nothing else will sustain. Nothing else is as sure. It's time for me to be real with you, God, and to let you comfort me the only way you can, because both you and I have a girl we're fighting for in India. When you're desperate to see God work, when death is in the house, when sickness seems to linger, when your only hope is God, faith is your remedy to fear. Faith is the remedy to fear. The gospel clearly tells us to believe in the resurrection and fear not. Romans 8:11 says, if he who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, he will also give life to your bodies through his Spirit. The life he gives us is one of faith, not of fear. So why bother God anymore? All the more bother God. Hang in there when you hear it's too hard. Jesus wants to show those of us who will not fear and only believe what he can do. Yes, he can heal and mend and provide when sickness is there, but it's when it gets to the point of death that he really gets to show off. It's in these only God moments, these moments where death is in the house, when our faith really becomes activated. Without faith, Scripture says, it is impossible to believe God. To please God. For whoever would draw near to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. You see, in the Scriptures, everyone wanted to see Jesus heal that sick girl. But the number dwindled when hope seemed lost. And I get it. It is hard to keep the faith, to keep following and believing when everything on paper says it's over. Because most of my life, I've thought that if I doubt God, or if I give up when it gets too hard, or if I wrestle with the truth of who he is, then I'm going to be a messy Christian. And I'd prefer to stay neat and tidy and read my Bible and let the mature Christians do all the hard stuff. But I am learning that the only way to really know God is to trust him in the storm, in the trial, at these points of death, even if it means engaging with him at a level I've never been at before. And we all can be certain that it is going to include believing God for what we can't see yet. If I had gotten what I had hoped for 3 years ago, a smooth, easy, quick adoption of a little girl from India, my journey with Jesus would have probably looked like this. But if I could show you what my journey has really looked like, it looks more like this. If we can see it all, if we can plan it all, we're rarely going to talk to Jesus about it. Jesus says, do not fear, only believe. That's faith when you step inside and you can't see how it's going to go. So we were denied February 2014, and we sat denied for 7 months. I wrote this on July 10th, 2014. God, I will still praise you. My lips will speak good of you. We learned that our advocate spoke with this committee and that has denied us 2 times since February. Yet they will reconsider letting Kavita come to our family if they speak to the orphanage director and he doesn't have another family waiting on an 8.5-year-old healthy girl. God, will we get Kavita? Will she be in our forever family? Have all these prayers for over 2 years been for her to go to another family? Why? Why more delays and more waiting? Why, God? I don't understand. I have begged and pleaded and fasted and prayed for you to act powerfully. I know your plans are for good and not harm. I know you love her and that you don't take your eyes off of her. Help us all as we wait to know if another family is matched with Kavita or if we are to be reconsidered. Help those who are following this story to look to you and not walk away. Increase my faith. Protect Kavita. I entrust the orphanage director and this committee's conversations to you. Ultimately, I entrust Kavita to you again. I love her that much to let her go if it's for her good and your glory. So yes, I have bothered God a lot for 3 years, more so than all my years combined. And this journal, it proves such. In fact, I've just got a few more pages left. But you know what? I've got another empty journal because I'm not done. It's not over. There's going to be another faith step. But by stepping inside, I've prayed daily for things that are out of my control. I can't tell you all the stuff that I have laid down at the foot of Jesus. Personal dreams, burdens. But I can attest, and this is not because I'm married to the pastor, I can attest, just as a human being, that inside the house is where it's at. While you all have had a very close look at our adoption journey to bring Kavita home, I can't put into words, though I try, what's taken place right in here. Thousands have been touched and moved by Kavita's story, but nothing compares to being on the inside of this. And I know that Jairus and his wife and their little girl would probably say the same thing. Because like Ben mentioned earlier, Jesus is into the individual. What he did in their midst and how he healed was far more intimate in that moment than for those that were outside who had lost hope. But most of us are on the outside. Sure, we'll say we have faith and pray and read our Bible and talk to God on behalf of the people of Nepal and Baltimore and the Tenderloin. But every one of us have been invited inside to experience the depths of the riches of his grace, to experience miracles and life change. That prompting that you feel inside urging you to encounter Jesus in a deeper way, that's the call to step inside. God has written your very own inside story. Don't be simply a reader or hearer of what God can do. Step inside. And once again, I get it. Someone else's story is a lot more messy for them than it is for you. Because you don't have to give up anything while you read their stories of them being in the trenches. But to you, my epic family, and you have stayed with us the whole way, I want us to experience together, and I want us to share our individual stories of what we are seeing God do in our lives and in our midst in this city, believing that he has the authority and the power to bring about change. That day, on the outside, there was commotion. That's where fear resides. But on the inside that day, there was courage, because that's where faith makes us well. Will you close your eyes for a minute? I'm going to lead us into prayer. And the worship team is going to come up and lead us in a song of praise. But before we sing, I want you to know what your response to God is going to be. I think we're in one of two camps. We're standing on the outside maybe. You're among the commotion and the fear. The environment that you are in feeds the fear and keeps God at an arm's distance. You're telling yourself that if you step inside, you're going to lose control. But what you have right now is a false sense of control anyway. Step inside today. Give those fears to God. He wants to be bothered. He wants to show you marvelous things. Because it's on the inside where our faith is made sight. Right now, in the quiet moment, you are in an environment where you are surrounded with people who are making this same decision to put their faith in God and not lose hope. Do not fear, only believe. Some of you are inside. You're waiting on God to move, to act. You too are in the same environment in this room with people who are believing God for the impossible. Stay inside and don't give up. Because Jesus is not restricted by death. He has overcome it on the cross and the grave. His power is not limited. He isn't blocked by delays. He is the undefeated one. He sees you and loves you. He doesn't go our speed. He doesn't do it our way. And it's just like Jesus to use a delay to grow our faith, to give us more than what we even asked. It's not over. Hang in there. Share your inside story with others who need the encouragement. Do not fear, only believe. What will your response be this morning? Lord God, you have taught us wonderful things in your scriptures today. Give everyone in this room the courage to step inside and then to stay inside and believe you will show us what's next. Encourage those in this room who are at the point of death to keep their eyes on you. For great are you, Lord.